The lead character in the film version of The Wall was played by Bob Geldof, who at the time was lead singer for the Boomtown Rats. 3 years later, he was the man who organized Live Aid. Roger Waters remembers how Geldof was cast.
Alan suggested him, and I said, yeah, good idea, great idea, see if he's interested. And so he called him up, and he wasn't interested, but he decided to do it anyway. In fact, there's a very funny story. He was asked to do it, and he was going to do some gigs on the continent, and he went with Faulkner O'Kelly, who was his manager at the time, I don't know, maybe he still is, to the airport, and he was going, I've been asked to do this Pink Floyd bloody war thing, what a load of crap, and Faulkner was trying to persuade him that it would be a good career move, and da-da-da, and blah, and da-da-da-da. And none of this would ever have come to light, except that my brother was the cab driver. I laid this on Geldof later at the time. He could not believe it, quite rightly, because what an incredible coincidence. It was my brother John. So anyway, at least Bob and I never had any kind of... there was never any pussyfooting about what he thought about Pink Floyd and the music and so on and so forth, because he was extremely scathing about the whole thing. And I never tried to persuade him differently. I'm not going to waste my education on Geldof trying to explain The Wall to him. He understands, he just doesn't realise he understands. There's one man in the world who understands, it's got to be Geldof. Bless him.
Episode 7 of Film Gold, and as with the last podcast, I'm joined by 2 collaborators today, and we have the return of Jcrash, who you may remember from the first episode, the intro episode, and then we also did Marathon Man together. How are you, mate?
Doing well. Thanks for having me again.
And making his podcast debut, I think, we have my old friend Filippo. How are you, mate?
Hi, Antony. Yeah, I'm well. This is my first podcast. You're right. Thanks for having me as well.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I'm on a kind of a mission to invite lots of friends and family and try and make them slightly famous, even though I'm not slightly famous myself. But I had my niece on for episode 5. We did the Social Network. It was kind of a compromise. I wanted to do Citizen Kane. She wanted to do Marvel. So we met somewhere in the middle, That was kind of fun.
I listened to part of that, but I admittedly have never seen that film. So you guys were kind of getting into it, and I thought I better get in there and watch it and then listen to this.
We found like we didn't really talk about the film for that long. We actually found ourselves talking about social media because she's young. She's like 23. So she's got a handle on like all the, especially like the dark side of social media. Anyway, that was a previous episode.
Cool.
So, I guess the audience knows Jcrash a little bit, but Filippo, can you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Filippo. I'm originally Italian, but I grew up in South Africa, and now I live in Spain. And I'm an artist. I'm a painter and a musician, self-taught musician.
3 musos.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Can't be bad.
Nice.
And we also got, for the audience, we got a mix of accents. So we got posh English, West Coast American, is that right? California.
Yes, West American.
And then South African. There you go. Not bad.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. I'll just go through like some of the particulars of this film. So it was obviously directed by Alan Parker, who's an English fella. I've seen a couple of his films. Midnight Express is a famous one from the late 70s. Pretty sure I saw Fame when I was a kid, but he's very eclectic.
Oh, he did Fame as well.
He did Fame, yeah. He went from Midnight Express to Fame to this film to Mississippi Burning, which is about...
I've seen that.
Good film.
It's a good
film.
Yeah.
And then he made The Commitments, which is another musical.
Oh, that's great film as well. The Commitments was really, really good.
He made Evita with Madonna, but I didn't see that. But I haven't seen anything since. Can we just talk about maybe our histories with this film? And maybe also with the Floyd album, The Wall, as well. So my history of this film actually involves you, Filippo, because you and I met in 2006. We were both working in Rome for this horrendous language school, really terrible school. And you were living in a place called Torre Vaianica, which is near Rome, on the beach, weren't you? Yeah. And you and I met, and we played a bit of music, drank a few beers, etc. I won't go into all the other details. I can't remember if we saw this film together, but we definitely talked about it a lot. I watched it a couple of times, and I was just blown away. So, Jcrash, how about you? When did you first see the film, and how many times would you say you've seen it?
I think I first saw the film when I was probably a teenager, 15, 16 is kind of when I started expanding musically. And, I was kind of a punk rock kind of kid in my early teens. That was all I listened to. Then I started discovering, a whole world out there. And I remember hearing, oh, yeah, they have a movie for that. And just some guys, we just picked it up and watched it. And that really got me into the record. I think I saw the film first. I was getting into Pink Floyd a little bit, but then I really dove into The Wall. And we talk about films all the time and what are our top films. I think The Wall is probably my favorite Pink Floyd record and one of my favorite albums of all time.
Wow, awesome. All right. Filippo, how about you?
Oh, I'll just repeat what Jcrash said. Exactly. I also saw the film before I heard the record. I think the film got me interested. I started watching it when I was in university, so probably in my 20s, because I also come from a rock, metal, punk background, and then I discovered all this other rock, fantastic music. Yeah, I think it's my favorite Pink Floyd record, and it's also one of my favorite albums of all time. Just the songwriting and the production is incredible, and then you've got the film to go with it. That's just amazing. With animation, it's just everything.
We'll get to the animation because I want someone to try and tell me what's going on with that. I was probably the other way around. I think I'd heard a lot of Pink Floyd, and actually I remember because I was listening to The Wall and I kept hearing this voice going like, how can you have your pudding if you don't eat your meat? This amazing Scottish accent. I was like, where's that come from? And so I probably got to the film. Yeah, I probably got to the film later than the album, I'm pretty sure. Just a couple of other things about the film. The animations were done by a fellow called Gerald Scarfe. He's like a satirical cartoonist. He worked for some of the national newspapers in England, and he worked for a newspaper called Private Eye, which is like a full-on satirical, exposing corruption in the government kind of thing. And I think political cartoons are fantastic because it's a brilliant way of lampooning politicians because you exaggerate all their features. If you remember Tony Blair, our wonderful ex-prime minister, whenever he's in cartoons, he's always got like a massive smile and like huge sticking out ears. And obviously, there's quite a few politicians who are a little bit overweight. And, I'm not fat shaming here, but you can kind of really show that with a gluttony, with a good cartoon caricature. So, and then of course you've got Roger Waters, and not surprisingly, Alan Parker, Gerald Scarfe and Roger Waters, they did have a few disagreements because you got these three highly creative guys, not surprising. But anyway, I think a lot of this film, quite a few things are about Syd Barrett. So are you guys familiar with the Syd Barrett era of Floyd? And what do you think about it compared to the other Floyd?
Personally, I prefer all the Pink Floyd after Syd Barrett. A lot of people like Syd Barrett and that era of Pink Floyd, but personally, I prefer the after Syd Barrett.
Right. Jcrash?
I agree. Of course, I have gone back through the Syd Barrett stuff. I think that Pink Floyd, in my humble opinion, expanded musically when Gilmour came on board. I think he was probably the most talented musician out of the group. That's not taking anything away from Richard Wright or Mason or Waters. I mean, they were all fantastic musicians, but the early Floyd stuff, it's cool. It's really different than what they evolved into with sort of this massive production concepts. But, a lot of other artists were doing concept type things. You had Tommy, you had, the Beatles made Hard Day's Night and kind of put music, that sort of rock music and that era into actually film. And They kind of sound garagey to me in the beginning. They're experimental, but I think that they sharpened their experimental edge and still brought that, but their range was greater when Gilmour came on.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Actually, Barrett's 2 solo albums are quite interesting. They're almost along the lines of, have you guys heard of Daniel Johnston?
Yeah.
Really lo-fi. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There's a
I heard
documentary.
some of his. Yeah, I saw the documentaries.
The Devil and Daniel Johnston. But anyway, like the Barrett stuff here, it's very... In fact, a couple of members of Pink Floyd helped him out with that. It's very lo-fi. It's very desolate. You know, you can really hear it's a guy who's having like some kind of serious breakdown or is already kind of in the stratosphere, you know, somewhere else. Pink Floyd was weird because they had 3 eras with 3 different leaders. So obviously Syd Barrett was the main guy at the beginnings, the singer, songwriter, guitarist. And then they had a democratic period. And then Roger Waters started with his authoritarian, some might say fascist, but we'll get to that, style of leadership. And then he left in 85. And then from what I heard, he wanted the Pink Floyd name to be retired. And David Gilmour says, well, actually, no, we'll just carry on. You can leave if you want. We'll carry on. So then they had another era with Dave Gilmour as a leader. So it's pretty interesting history. And, you know, they started off as kind of an R&B band, and then they were a bit garagey, I agree with you, and psychedelic, prog, and then all sorts. Anyway, the background of this film and the background of the album, there was a concert in Montreal, I believe, in 1977. You may have heard of this, where Roger Waters spat on one of the fans. They were in a huge stadium.
I remember hearing that story.
Yeah, they hated stadium rock. You know, it wasn't what they wanted to do at all. But obviously, you know, they were getting all the riches. And obviously, there's loads of stuff in this film about fame and everything. And Roger Waters spotted a guy who looked like he was having a really good time. And this is Roger Waters' own words. And he didn't like it. He thought, this is bullshit, you know, this big stadium. Why is this guy enjoying it? You know, I'm not enjoying it. He spat on him. And then, of course, they had the idea of erecting a wall on the stage, and highly symbolic, of course. And the production of the film that we're going to talk about today, just briefly, just on the name of the film, it's officially called Pink Floyd, The Wall, which is a bit misleading because you might think that it's going to have Pink Floyd. Obviously, it's got their music, but the lead character is called Pink Floyd because you hear when he's a kid, his friends going, "Oi, Pinky!" When he's putting the bullet on the train tracks, and then you hear Mr.
Does he say Pinky, or I always thought it was Pinkhead?
No, it's definitely "Oi, Pinky" with a Cockney accent.
Yeah. Okay.
You know,
All right.
Pinky, get off the line.
Get off the line.
The train's coming.
Good accent. I like that. Yeah. Oi, Pinky. Yeah. So this was a production. Like I say, it was a kind of a triumvirate of Alan Parker, Gerald Scarfe, and Roger Waters. And one thing I saw, like for all the skinhead parts, you know, the Nazi stuff, they used real skinheads.
Oh, I heard that as
the
well.
bits where they're like attacking, you know, raping women and stuff, and they were really worried because, you know, the skinheads were kind of getting into it. Not saying that anyone got assaulted, but they had to like really. And a bit of useless trivia: they filmed that at the same gasworks where Kubrick filmed Full Metal Jacket.
Right.
Yeah, I hope I haven't burst anyone's bubble who didn't know that, but Full Metal Jacket, the second part, was all filmed in a gasworks in East London because Stanley Kubrick didn't want to travel to, you know, the Philippines or Thailand or wherever they normally film Vietnam films.
There's some scenes in the wall with like dunes. There's some dunes. Was that the gasworks as well?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking it was the Nazi stuff, you know, the Nazi rallies.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Not sure where they filmed the interiors. Should have looked that up. As far as the plot, I mean, the director, Alan Parker, said the plot is a burned out rock star thinking back to his life, you know, losing his father in the war. But I think the director's probably obligated to give some sort of narrative because to me, this is so sprawling, like it's all over the place, you know. I love it. But would you say there's a plot going on here? Is there any kind of narrative arc we can follow or not?
I think it is definitely a story of, you know, the character, but the wall itself is such a massive concept, and it's one that everybody can relate to socially because of the society's impact on the individual. And the character just becomes the catalyst for the bigger themes that come in, and it's relatable to an extent as it goes through the character's life.
Yeah. Actually, the film Annie Hall, this is a weird kind of comparison. Annie Hall, the Woody Allen film, they do this interesting thing where towards the end of the film, they actually flash back to earlier scenes in the film, which is a really difficult thing to pull off. And they do it here as well. Like a flash of images near the beginning of the film, and then in the second half of the film, you flash back to stuff that was like 10 minutes earlier. It's really interesting how they get away with that. That must be, I guess, when you've got an editor who knows what he's doing.
I was going to say that I think the concept of that is that this is what's going on in the human brain on sort of a daily basis. And yeah, there's these extremes of, mental anguish you can go in, but there's also just daily. You're thinking back, when I was a kid here or this, I remember these memories flash into your mind. And so it's bouncing around, 1 second he's a kid, and then he's Pink, adult Pink sitting in the chair, and then he moves into this the kid sitting into the chair. It's just this interweaving of time sequences that's how memories work. They just come in and come out, and they spark these feelings. And like you said, the editing in this was amazing. Paying so much attention to every detail.
I always think with a director, Jesus, what a headache that must be. To even think about putting all this together. I mean, some bits you get like 20, 30 images in seconds,
I agree. It's like a trip through the guy's brain, because there's some weird scenes, like the transition between scenes. I didn't notice this when I watched it years ago, but there's a scene where he sees the girl through the window of he's in his trailer. That's it.
Yeah,
he's in his trailer. He sees the girl through the window. Then he like opens the door and looks at her, stares at her, and she comes over. And she goes into his room, and then all of a sudden they in an apartment. The scene where he's watching TV, and she's like, "Are you feeling okay?"
Yeah,
and
I love this. This is bad.
He's in an apartment, And then there's actually a scene where he's looking out of where you can see the view outside. It's, I don't know if it's New York but it's a city. Yeah. So that transition. Then there's another transition I noticed. When he's a child and he goes into the trenches, and all of a sudden he's in a hospital, and he finds himself as an adult.
A mental hospital, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, I don't think you could possibly explain all of this, really. It's just a sensory experience.
I was going to add to what Filippo said about him with the woman. There's definitely a relationship aspect. So if you kind of look at it sociologically, so to speak, there's this, relationship that he has with his mother, that he has with his future wife, but there's this theme in all the women. And Filippo made me think of that other scene where he's sitting at his desk in his room when he's a kid, and he sees the girl changing in the house across the street, and he turns the light off, and he's watching her. But if you notice, all the females have a distinct look to them. It's this whole stereotype of the women that he, finds himself with, or his type, and that girl, and then he meets his wife, and then even the girl in the scene you were talking about when he steps out of the trailer, the groupie has those characteristics of all those women in his life. And, so that was an interesting point.
That they intercut him as a kid watching a ginger-haired girl from a window, and then you see him as an adult with a ginger-haired wife. Like some would say, that's too obvious. I mean, it didn't bother me in the slightest, And then you've got some really direct imagery, like as a kid, he's snuggling in his mother's bed, and then as an adult, he's got the blanket over him,
Yeah. In a fetal position on the bed. I don't know, people that critique it, say it's clunky. I mean, our minds are clunky. Life is clunky, we're all kind of bouncing around, and it's like, it's confusion. That's kind of the point of the film, is to demonstrate that. Like you're watching, you're like, why is it going back here? You know, if you're used to the sort of a linear way of looking at things, then you're going to watch the movie and you're going to be like, well, why is it doing all this stuff? But it's promoting that feeling and the visceral kind of feeling inside you of like, what is going on? Like the mothers, that's kind of the way our minds and operate. And I think it's very effective.
I think especially like a traumatized mind, you know, I mean, he's got all this stuff going on, but, right, if you guys don't mind, I just want to describe. We're not going to go scene by scene because we'll be here for 6 months, I think, trying to work out what all the imagery means. But I just want to describe to the listeners just the opening 2 or 3 minutes, because what it is, it works as quite a nice sort of microcosm of the whole film. So basically, you get this. I think it's a Vera Lynn song. I don't know if you're familiar with Vera Lynn, but she was like a middle-aged woman who used to sing to the troops. Most of it, We'll Meet Again, which weirdly enough was used at the end of Doctor Strangelove when the nuclear bomb is detonated. Such a brilliant, ironic use of it.
Awesome.
Vera Lynn died recently, I think, last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, last year.
Maybe.
I think. Yeah. Prince Philip also died, but who gives a fuck? Sorry, just being political for a second. Sorry. Anyway, yeah. So this opening scene. So the camera's following this like carpeted floor, which I guess is a hotel. You've got the vacuum cleaner going, and then you cut to his father in a. I thought it was a trench, but I thought they only used trenches in the First World War. But anyway.
Yeah.
So he's lighting an oil lamp, and then you hear that horrible sound of the bombs. He's cleaning his gun, and then you get the song "When the Tigers Broke Free," which actually ended up on the Pink Floyd album, The Final Cut, which I call the final straw, because it was such a Roger Waters autobiographical album. I think that was the end of the band, really, in terms of him. And then you have Pink on a rugby pitch, which sort of symbolizes, you know, an upper class private school. And then you have Pink, Bob Geldof, with a cigarette burning down, which apparently was a Syd Barrett thing. Apparently he used to do that. You know, he was so high that, or so sort of catatonic that he didn't notice the cigarette burning. Then you go back to the cleaner. She knocks on the door, and then the chain of the door is combined with like the kids bursting through this like chain link fence. Again, like people would say, oh, it's too obvious, but I just think it's brilliant. And then it's intercut with this World War II battle. Then you got cops dealing with rioting kids. Then you got In the Flesh, you got the Nazi rally, and then Pink's father bombed in this enormous explosion. Like I couldn't believe how huge that explosion was. And then almost my favorite cut is the cut to his wife sleeping in a deck chair in the garden with Pink as a baby in the pram at the exact moment that his father is dying thousands of miles away. She's in this country garden with the birds singing. You know, I just think it's fantastic. Anyway, that's just the first few minutes, and in a way, it kind of serves as a summary of the film, you know. But what do you think about Bob Geldof in this role? Filippo, what do you reckon?
I liked the way he sang some parts. Oh, yeah. You mean his acting or his
Well,
singing?
both, yeah. He did sing In the Flesh, didn't he? He was singing, so you might want to go to the show. That's him. But what about his acting? Sort of minimalist style, really?
Yeah, I thought it was good. You know, I liked his portrayal of a guy who slowly goes towards insanity. I thought it was pretty good. Just his expression, his facial expression, where he's just kind of blank. You know, like Roger Waters said about Syd Barrett when he started losing it, kind of, his eyes were blank.
What's the lyric?
Black holes in the
Black holes in
black
the sky.
holes in the sky.
Shine on you, crazy.
So I thought he pulled it off pretty good. Well, like his Syd Barrett impersonation, as well as when he becomes the dictator. I thought that was a good performance.
Yeah. Jcrash, what do you reckon?
I thought he was great. You know, he was also a musical performer with the Boomtown Rats. And so he knew how to work a crowd and to be in a persona as a stage musician. I thought he went off the hook when he did the dictator parts. He was just perfectly animated. He obviously understood the record and the concept and just everything. And he had good direction that probably helped him through the filming aspects.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, I guess it's minimalist, but then, he had to be in the pool of blood, the swimming pool. That was some quite physical stuff. And then obviously he trashes the hotel room. You've got the Nazi rally. So it's not just him being catatonic, but even with that bit, you need the right person. He had the look, the unshaven. Bob Geldof was famous. I mean, the Boomtown Rats, I've never met anyone who knows any songs beyond I Don't Like Mondays and Rat Trap.
Right.
Please enlighten me. But of course, Bob Geldof now is so synonymous with Band Aid and Live Aid. People almost forget that he was actually a rock star or a musician. And he's also known for being very scruffy. So he kind of probably worked and he just had the right look in his eye. And obviously he was a rock star and he knew all about, the shallow excesses of rock stardom, which is one of the themes of this film. So, yeah, I think he did pretty well.
Was he in any other movies? Do you know?
That's a good question. He definitely didn't before this. Yeah, I'm going to say I don't think so, actually, no.
Because I haven't seen him in any other...
I've never seen him make any music as well after that either. I don't know what he's been doing apart from schmoozing with political leaders. I don't know. I honestly don't know how he spends his day. How does Bob Geldof spend his day, listeners? Right to the usual address. Anyway, so yeah, the themes of this film, I guess one of the obvious ones is loneliness. So obviously Pink loses his father. I was listening to a podcast today about this film just to see if there were any ideas I could steal. And in fact, they weren't, because all the stuff they said I was kind of thinking already, although they said something interesting. They said that loneliness can get addictive. And I think I've been guilty of this. You just indulge the loneliness. And I think The Wall is just such a perfect album to indulge it. But what do we get about loneliness, do you think, in this film?
I think the loneliness part, probably a lot, like you said, that Roger Waters lost his father. I think it's quite autobiographical, probably, because I heard Syd Barrett also lost his father, and they were quite good friends because they had a lot in common when they were young. I don't know if they went to the same school.
One of the interesting things is that Syd Barrett was studying art and all the others were studying architecture. And a lot of people said that the later Floyd is quite architectural in the way that it's designed really well, Anyway, that's another story, sorry.
Interesting.
How's the loneliness shown here? I mean, being alone, again, some would say it's too obvious, a guy alone in a hotel room. But are there any other sort of ways that they convey this theme?
I think in a lot of ways, there's an animation scene at the end, the trial, just before the trial, where he's like in a big, like the walls all around him. And also the fact that he's behind a wall, there's also a scene where he's banging against the wall.
Yeah, sliding down the wall as well, yeah.
It's like he's alone behind the wall.
Yeah, and obviously loads of scenes. He's alone in the mental hospital. He's alone in a cubicle.
Loneliness and isolation, isolated within his own mind and his own thought and his own experience. And I think that's what makes the work itself so relatable. I think that everybody can relate to that isolation that we feel where, you never, people tend to not express their true thoughts about a lot of things. We hold things inside and they end up having a toll on us physically, mentally, that impact just generally on your health and well-being that happens when you're isolated. And it takes a lot of different forms for different people, but it's very relatable. He lost his father at a young age, but ultimately through life, we lose people that are very close to us, regardless of your age, although it's certainly more impactful when you're younger. It's something that every human being goes through.
Yeah, I mean, I think Roger Waters said the first half of the film is very autobiographical, all the childhood stuff. I mean, we'll get to another one of the themes is this idea of factory education and the war thing of, he gets the scroll from the king, but it's printed, there's not even like a signature from the king.
Yeah, and the line is, His Majesty signed with his own rubber stamp. you know?
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, what I was saying earlier, I think this later part of their career, a lot of the wall and then the final cut, it's one of those things in a band, if something is too close to one member, the other guys couldn't really relate to that. So I think that's one of the things that drove Roger Waters out of the band. Another theme is like the kind of emptiness of the rock star life. And I've never been a rock star, but but you can see, it's almost like a continuation of what he has as a child, but he kind of wants to be on his own. Like he gets his groupie back to his room, but he's too catatonic to do anything, talk to her, do anything else with her, You get Bob Hoskins. Are you familiar with him? Like a famous British actor. He doesn't have any lines, but he's the manager.
Right.
Yeah, he's an absolute legend in England. The Long Good Friday is a film I'd recommend.
I've seen him in other movies.
Yeah, he turns up. He very often, I guess he'd play gangsters and stuff. He did a great film called Mona Lisa in the 80s. He's a real Cockney, he's an authentic Cockney. And fortunately, like I say, he doesn't have any lines in this. But you see him mouthing lines, but you don't hear his voice. And then, of course, we got all the war stuff. And like you said, Roger Waters' father did die in, I think it was in Anzio in Italy, in fact.
I think he says that in one of the songs. He mentions Anzio. There's a scene in the movie as well, actually, where his father dies, I think, is Anzio, because you see the dunes. There's like dunes and the sea, and that's Anzio, because I know, because I lived near there, so I know.
Whereabouts is Anzio in Italy?
It's near Rome. It's about 40 kilometers from Rome on the coast. I don't know how much that is in miles.
25
and there's
miles?
An American, about 25 miles, yeah. And there's an American cemetery there in Anzio. It's huge, typically American, with the white crosses. And actually, I thought, like in the movie, there's some scenes of those, all the crosses.
Yes.
Absolutely.
In the animation when the planes turn into crosses.
That's it.
That kind of reminded me of Anzio as well, that scene. Because when I went to the cemetery in Anzio, it's like that, kind of all the white crosses everywhere.
Yeah, and like I say, those lyrics to those songs, where the tigers broke free, I don't know, lyrics which are too literal sometimes don't work, but he just makes it work because I think you can hear. The other thing about Roger Waters' voice, obviously he wasn't the main singer in Pink Floyd, but he sung a lot of The Wall. His voice is not technically great at all, but it's perfect in its sort of imperfection, and the screaming. There's lots of screams in this film, which are really effective. Again, they sound like they're coming from the gut, and the idea with the war is the idea that there's that lyric about a few hundred ordinary lives. Just to take, I was just watching Hamburger Hill, which is about the Vietnam War, and it's about this famous battle to take a hill. And great. What happens when you've taken the hill and you've lost 300 men? Oh, they gave the hill back to the Viet Cong. It's like, oh yeah, that was a waste of time, wasn't it? And this idea, and I don't know if you're familiar with Blackadder, but there's a brilliant joke when they're talking about World War One, and they said we've gained about as much ground as an asthmatic ant carrying some heavy shopping. A very Blackadder joke, yeah. The idea of just wasting all these lives to gain like almost no ground at all. There's a lot about obviously the futility of war and things like that. One thing I did want to get onto, a bit of a tangent here, education. So we get this famous scene where Pinky is writing some poetry, which of course brilliantly turns out to be the lyrics from Money.
Yeah.
You got the teacher going, a Learjet, new car, caviar.
The laddie reckons himself a poet.
The laddie reckons himself a poet. Oh, and all the other kids are laughing. And when I was watching that, I was getting some feelings of anger because it's this thing about the school system where it's all left brain, it's all like maths, science, regurgitating information. And what I want to ask you both in turn, because the three of us grew up in very different places or went to school in different places. If you don't mind, Jcrash, first of all, can you tell us just a little bit about your education and maybe about, did the school you went to encourage creativity, or was it more kind of, left brain education, let's say? What would you say about that?
I would say just standard run-of-the-mill public education. Out here, I'm in California, so they like to fancy themselves as progressive, quote unquote. But no, I could say that as far as creativity goes, no. I mean, our school system is to pretty much get you through it and get you proficient in some basics and then move you out. You know, we did have music and we did have drama and, you know, different shop classes and stuff like that. And I think some of the newer high schools now are gearing more towards the arts and some things like that. But, you know, the whole system in itself is political. It's like going to any art school or going to any music school. When you go to those institutions, their way is going to be put on you. And I think the British system, I mean, you know better than I, of course, but I would assume it's similar, you know, get them in, get them out. You know, back at that time, it was a lot stricter. I mean, they just whooped you. I mean, I remember like the principal could take you in and paddle you and, you know, all that stuff. And that really wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. Filippo, you went to school in South Africa, which is...
it was
Go on.
it was the same kind of thing. We'd get whacked if we stepped out of line, and we had to stand in line waiting for class. You couldn't speak out of turn. And it was in South Africa during apartheid, and it was an all-white school we went to, European. There were people from all over. They were like Greeks, Portuguese, Italians, but no black people. It was a strict school, but it was starting to open up because we had art class, and that's actually when I got inspired to do art. I was lucky because I had a good art teacher. She was into music as well, so she was very open-minded, but the rest of it was quite strict. That's probably why I found I could relate to the wall so much, and I found it appealing when I was younger because of the whole loneliness thing, and also the teachers making fun of you in front of the class if you were different, or they kind of wanted everyone to be the same. We had uniforms as well. And
we did as well.
And every Friday we had military day. So we had to dress up in military uniform and march up and down the square.
Oh, wow. Shit, really?
That's crazy.
Every Friday we had little military berets. And
I can see why you like
the girls.
This film then. You relate to this film. Holy shit.
Yeah, sure.
And the girls?
The guys did the military stuff, and the girls did, what did they do? Oh, they did like, I don't even know what the girls did.
Home ec or something? Home
cooking.
Cooking and sewing.
Home ec, and some of them did drummies. Do you know what drummies are? I think it's a South African thing. They wear like uniforms and they march and they throw batons up in the air and catch them, and they all...
like cheerleading or something like that.
Kind of like cheerleading, but they have uniforms. I think it's a very South African thing. They wear uniforms and they march up and down in sync.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was very military orientated. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I went to a grammar school, which is kind of, you have to pass a test to get into it, but it's not like one of the elite schools by any means. But ours was like a rugby school, That's why, they have the rugby posts in this film. I always clocked that when I watched this film.
We were the same. We all were the same.
Yeah, it was always like rugby, like, oh, you don't want to play football, soccer. Most of us wanted to play football. It's like, nah, you're going to play rugby. We're going to turn you into a man, that kind of thing.
We had to play rugby as well because South Africa is big with rugby because we don't play soccer or football. So it actually reminds me of you, Antony, because I was doing piano lessons at the time. And so we were all in the hall and like they were choosing people to play rugby. And I couldn't play because I had piano lessons. So it reminds me.
I know what's coming here. Yeah. Oh, God.
It reminds me of a film of Monty Python, The Meaning of Life, where they're all soldiers. And he said, well, I'm learning the piano.
Yeah.
Learning the piano.
What I'm going to do, actually, guys, when you're listening back to this, when it's being released, I'm going to put that clip in now.
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
Don't stand there, Gorpin! Like you've never seen the undergod before! Now, today we're going to do marching up and down the square! That is, unless any of you got anything better to do. Well, anyone got anything they'd rather be doing than marching up and down the square? Yes, Atkinson. What would you rather be doing, Atkinson?
Well, to be quite honest, Sarge, I'd rather be at home with the wife and kids.
Would you now?
Yes, Sarge.
Right, off you go. Now, everybody else happy with my little plan of marching up and down the square a bit?
Sarge,
Yes.
I've got a book I'd quite like to read.
Right, you go read your book then. Now, everybody else quite content to join in with my little scheme of marching up and down the square?
Sarge?
Yes, Wycliffe, what is it?
Well, I'm learning the piano.
Learning the piano?
Yes, Sarge.
And I suppose you want to go and practice, eh? Marching up and down the square, not good enough for you, eh?
Well,
Right, off you go! Now, what about the rest of you? Rather be at the pictures, I suppose. All right, off you go! Bloody army, I don't know where it's coming to. Right, Sergeant Major marching up and down the square. Left, right, left.
And so that was like, all these big rugby guys got bullied for that as well.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I remember our sports teachers were absolutely brutal. And then when you got to high school, it started like 11, 12 years old. And then by the age of 14, 15, they all wanted to be really chummy. Always felt like they were fucking with our heads a bit, like good cop, bad cop.
Oh.
But in terms of creativity, there was like a music, they used to call it schoolhouse. It was like a music, literally looked like a house in our school. But I started a band or like a duo with a fellow when we were 15 because I started playing the guitar when I was 14. And we tried to book a room. And I always remember this. The music teacher said, well, what exam are you studying for? And I'm like, what? We were like a duo. Like he plays the piano, I play the guitar. Why do we need to study for? But it's a funny thing with music in that music is a creative thing, but music also has a kind of a mathematical side. I mean, there's a tangent I won't go on now that I mentioned on another podcast of mine. Basically, I met this fellow who played this amazing music, and then I played this kind of bluesy thing that I'd made up that didn't technically sound great. And I was like, God, you're such a good pianist. And he said, yeah, but if you take the music away, I don't know anything. So a lot of people learn music by reading music. They learn how to play Beethoven, but it's not actually a creative thing unless you put your own stamp on it. But it was interesting, like in a lot of schools, I don't know what it's like now, but when I was at school, you had to fight to be creative. You had to fight to book a room just to play a bit of music for an hour. So it kind of made me angry when I was thinking about it, to be honest, this anti-creativity. But then the other side of that, what would happen if it was all right brain activities? You'd end up with the Society of Artists, which sounds great to us.
Yeah.
So, like, who's going to do all the,
Probably both extremes are not good, probably.
Yeah.
That's another theme that I think is in The Wall, the artistic extreme where he's an artist, but he becomes completely isolated as an artist. Then he goes to the other extreme, which is, the strict dictatorial state. Yeah. So I think there's also a theme of chaos and order. That's what I felt.
That's a good segue. I'm just going to say one more thing about the education. You've got the mincing machines and the conveyor belts, and obviously you've got the famous, we'll go to the music in a sec, but you've got the most famous song, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, which is the one that was in the charts at the time. But let's segue to the Nazism. I wasn't totally sure exactly what they were saying. I mean, obviously it's something to do with power and control. I mean, it wasn't exactly Nazis, but it was obviously like totalitarian. It was, the symbol was the double hammer. What do you think that was all about in terms of the whatever narrative there is in this film? Anybody?
Well, I was going to connect it to the isolation in the education and marriage and him being a rock star. He's floating through these different institutions. I think the main thing that I get from The Wall, I mean, we have all these micro themes, but the macro theme to me is society's assault on the individual. Listening to Filippo's experiences in his school and all our experiences, I think that there's a big social control theme in how the society takes away from that individual. And ultimately, if you don't play by the rules of society, you are sequestered and isolated. And it's an interesting parallel in the society. We have a lot of groups kind of rallying for certain, quote, marginalized groups and these kind of things, but that's just going to morph into the new totalitarianism, whatever their philosophies are or religions, that it's just a stripping down of the individual and to the point where the individuals just completely form these walls around themselves and they almost shut down. You know, in the song Comfortably Numb is kind of the climax of that whole experience. When you're young, you say shit you shouldn't because you don't know any better. You don't know any better what these people want you to say. You're free. You go out. I mean, a kid will go run right out in the street. And they don't know you're not supposed to run out in the street. There's all these things. And then eventually, you know, with the society and as they're moving through the education and he has these experiences with these different institutions, ultimately, he's just numb to it all now. He's lost that sense of freedom and wonder about the world as he's just been broken down. Society's going to enforce its will on you and you're going to bend. And it doesn't matter what type of culture or society you're in. I mean, it ends up morphing into people trying to control when just the individual wants to be free, you know, the individual expression.
Yeah, I agree. You know, the loss of innocence. There's a scene as well where he's just like freaked out and they find him in his room and he's passed out. And then he kind of starts melting. They take him away. And he's like melting. It's like he was saying, like his innocent self metamorphosis, because then he rips off that his like he stripped away his sensitive side or his vulnerability and he just becomes a cold dictator.
Yeah, and it could be like someone who's just been kicked around the whole time is taking back power. We don't know if it's a fantasy or not. I mean, who the hell knows with this film, you know? Anything could be a fantasy, you know. I didn't really try and make sense of any narrative in this film. I was just loving all the imagery and all the themes and the amazing music, you know. He might be making a link between this sort of industrial education of all these kids going through the grinder, you know, the mid-school, or just a comment on society, you know, because just going back to education just for 2 seconds, me and an old school friend, we actually went back to our old secondary school in about 2012, I think. And that was like 25 years after we left. And I couldn't believe it. There's CCTV all around the school and the field where we used to play rugby has a chain link fence around it. And of course, we asked the deputy head who took us around, and of course he had an answer. Oh, there's been some dodgy characters hanging around the school. And I'm like, yeah, all right. There were dodgy characters hanging around the school when I was, including me, of course. Yeah, I was one of them. But, you know, this whole, you know, we're really going this way. And this is 1982. So obviously it's looking back to some sort of Nazi or communism era, but it's coming forward as well to what we got now, this sort of security state, and just horrible. Let's talk about the animation. So you mentioned, the flowers that kind of turn into genitals and then they turn into demons, and I wasn't sure exactly what was going on. And then you've got hammers dancing and eagles. Can one of you try and make sense of this for me, or do we need to make sense?
I heard an interview with Roger Waters saying that what's his name? Gerald Scarfe, because he did all the animation and when he did that scene, where the flowers change into genitals, Roger Waters used to tease him saying, "What's that, Gerald? What's that?
Yeah.
What's that there, Gerald?" But I think it's like a relationship, and they become monsters, but the female wins, and then the female flower becomes a dragon.
Yeah.
And then the dragon changes
Dragon
into
lady.
a warplane, which is really interesting because I don't know if Gerald Scarfe did it intentionally, but it reminds me of Carl Jung. It's the female archetype. The female is associated with chaos and a dragon, and man is associated with order. So I don't know if he did it consciously, or maybe he just tapped into some underlying archetype. I don't know.
I think Gerald Scarfe said that he didn't know where it came from. And we all do creative stuff, Half of the fun is you don't know where it comes from, do you? You learn something about yourself when you actually turn off the noise and turn off the filter and the mind and stop controlling it. All kinds of crazy stuff can come out, right? Jcrash, what about the animation?
Oh, I love the animation, and I think it still holds up so strong today. It works because it's a way of conveying these different feelings or concepts. Visual art is able to do that, and that's the beauty of film, I think, is that it gives you a visual medium to process it in your own mind. It's just like when two different people look at a piece of art, physical art, it conjures up these things within that individual. One of the things that I noted watching it recently was how the art direction, the real life art direction, has a palette to it that's somewhat reminiscent of the actual art, the lighting sequences, the dream ambiance of the shots, like you're talking the dunes and the television on the dunes and the sky's kind of weird. And this wasn't like CGI. This was, really detailed in the lighting and the different backdrops so to me, it made the transition into the animated scenes. It flows in that way.
No, I was thinking of Terry Gilliam as well. I mean, I don't know, Jcrash, how familiar are you with Monty Python? Have you seen
a little bit? Yeah, I've seen some Monty Python. Yeah, and I know Gilliam, of course. Like I think of Brazil. Even 12 Monkeys kind of has that industrial. It's sort of this dystopic weirdness that he can portray with that.
Well, I was thinking more the animation for Monty Python because going back to The Meaning of Life, which Filippo and I used to watch that, and it's not actually, I don't think, a great film. I think we agreed that, didn't we? There's just some great scenes. And if you remember the Zodiac song where he's talking about space, there's a bit again where it turns into genitals. And it just reminded me of Gilliam. But I think Gilliam's almost like a more comedic version of what we've got here.
Yeah, it does remind me of Gilliam. Yeah.
It's just the idea that you can just do anything, really, and I think to the three of us, all these things kind of make sense, but I can imagine to someone watching this film who's maybe expecting something a bit more narrative driven or something, it might go over their head. But I think maybe the key with this film, not that I'd ever tell anyone how to watch a film, but the key is maybe not to try and follow it too closely and just to revel in the themes, wouldn't you say, in the imagery.
Well, to me, like the films I love the most, it's just personally, are those type of movies that don't totally beat you over the head with what they're trying to say. I mean, I think of 2001 or something like that, where everybody watches it and they know they just experienced something. You just don't quite understand what it is. That's why it merits those heated visits, and you come back to it every time. And depending on the stage of your life, you'll see different things. And I think that The Wall has that just ability. I was kind of thinking about another film that people didn't understand, but I thought it was just excellent, was A Tree of Life. where he's flashing back to his childhood, and then he's out on a beach somewhere, and like, you know, people watched it and they were like, this is garbage, you know, it doesn't make any sense. But it's art open to interpretation, and it, you know, any type of film is an art medium. Yeah. But then there's art films, you know, and this is definitely an art film.
You've got to get it right, otherwise it can come off really pretentious. But
exactly, and I'm sure this is super pretentious to a lot of people. I mean, some people, you know, watch this and they're like, I mean, in fact, I was looking at the Metascore on IMDb.
Yeah, it's very low.
You know, but Ebert, of course, Roger Ebert gave it 100. You know, he was like 4 stars. It's a fucking masterpiece. And then some of the other, the critics were, you know, oh, this is a pretentious load, and you know, all the things that you hear about art. I mean, that's just sort of the nature of art.
Yeah, definitely. Each person can interpret it a different way. And like Roger Waters said, the end of the film, you know, the wall comes down and then there's the kids picking up the block. Yeah, I saw one of his interviews saying that he doesn't know what that means, but I have my own interpretation of it. So I think sometimes artists do things, they're not even sure what they're doing. It just feels right to do it this way. I don't know why. And then people find meaning in it. So sometimes the artist doesn't even know what they're on about.
It's like I was saying earlier, you know, you learn about yourself by turning off the filter, because our minds filter everything and try and control everything. You know, we just can't help it. So, I mean, I get it through meditation, but, you know, you can get the flow state, the famous flow state, you know, by playing the guitar, painting, writing, whatever it is.
Filippo, what was your interpretation of kind of the end there?
Of the end?
Yeah, with the kids.
The whole thing's about extreme chaos and then extreme order, like out of the chaos kind of, and then it goes back to the beginning. It's like he goes through that whole fascist thing, you know, where there's extreme order, everything is controlled, but you can't have that. It's too extreme, so it explodes. And then the kids come and pick up the pieces and kind of rebuild. It's like a society collapsing, like the Soviet Union collapsed because it was just getting too much, or Nazi Germany. And then, I don't know, the new generation come and build it again.
Yeah, that last shot, what was it? A boy picking up, what do you call that thing? A Molotov cocktail?
Molotov.
Freeze framed on it. I mean, I don't know exactly what that meant, but...
He smells it and then he empties the bottle. He smells it and like he makes a grimace kind of, and then he empties it. I think that's like the new generation rebuilding.
All right, so the elephant in the room here is the music, of course. Now, we'll get on to the Floyd music in a second. Other than the songs, you do get, as I said, you get a bit of Vera Lynn. You get a lot of triumphal war music, making it all sound so wonderful with all the military marching bands and all that. And then you also get some interesting stuff that would have come out of like a 1940s radio, this kind of genteel music. And of course, it's all meant to contrast with the carnage that you see in the trenches. Let's talk about the Floyd music. I mean, I've got a couple of favorite songs. Do you want to just pick I'll go first, actually. I think when we talk about loneliness, I think the Nobody Home song, where he talks about the Hendrix perm and the pinhole burns. When I pick up the phone, there's nobody. I mean, that is just, you know, I wouldn't recommend that for anyone who's suffering from depression or anything, because that is really, it's the kind of song that can send you over the edge. I mean, like I said earlier, when I was indulging myself in my lonely state, you know, many years ago, I think this song is one of those ones, you know, but it's just amazingly effective. But can we pick like maybe a couple of favorite songs, either as songs or as the way they're used in the film?
I think every song has its place. I mean, obviously, Comfortably Numb, I mean, you know, to me, it's just probably, you know, one of the greatest masterpieces of a song just in general. But what I noticed about the music is how different it is in the film to how it is when you listen to the album. It's almost like an adapted screenplay. The way the music comes off is very cinematic. like you said, a lot of choral kind of arrangements, big band kind of things. But then there's also like just different takes that, aren't on the album itself, the physical album. They redid the music in these arrangements and stuff in a way that works with the film. But when I listen to the album, it's like, it has a similar impact, but it's also more in your face, and the album itself is more aggressive to me.
Yeah, they changed it a little bit, I think, but it's more or less the songs from The Wall.
I think they had to adapt the music to the film. And they did it a few years later, didn't they?
Well, the film was 3 years after the album, but then I don't know whether... I'm sure they did a few re-recordings, so I don't know.
Yeah.
The one that really stuck out to me was Mother. And, of course, John Lennon did a very good song called Mother, which is completely different. But obviously a lot of rock stars have sung about their mothers, these complex relationships. But, he says, Mother, do you think she's good enough? And then the final one's like, Mother, do you think she'll break my heart? I found pretty heartbreaking myself,
Yeah, I think Mother was also edited. I think it was made it longer. They added some violence. I agree with Jcrash, though, that it's all like good. I like all the songs because I think it's like one of those perfect albums that just every single part is just amazing. And I prefer the less commercial songs because I've heard them less. Brick in the Wall Part 2 is over. Yeah. So it's brilliant, but I've heard it so many times.
Of course.
That I just prefer, and I noticed they don't have Hey You isn't in the film. They cut that out. And then there's another piece that I was a bit disappointed when I heard the actual album because I'd seen the film first, that there's a piece that's missing in the album that's just before I Need a Dirty Woman, just before that. Shall we drive a more powerful car?
Yeah, I love that.
Part.
Yeah,
I love that part, and it's not on the album.
Was that on another album, or did they just not end up using it?
I don't think it was ever recorded on an album.
All right.
I don't know. Yeah,
and of course, like I said, when the Tigers Broke Free ended up on the next album, the final cut. I think the final cut came out in '83, so they're probably recording it at this time. Goodbye Cruel World, I've always found very poignant. Yeah, Another Brick in the Wall. There's 3 versions. Yeah, the famous one is the second one. I know what you mean. It's been so overplayed. Comfortably Numb is the same. It's obviously a great song, but I think I just heard it when you've heard it 400 times, through your life.
I like Another Brick in the Wall Part 1.
Yeah, so do I, yeah.
Really good,
yeah.
Where he plays with a plane. He's in church and he's playing with that plane, the toy plane.
I like the other one where he's like, I want to go home. Take off this uniform and leave the show. But then in the film, he's like sitting in the corner and he's just muttering it. Like he's like, I want to go home.
Yeah, I think the security guard hears him.
Oh, is that when he's singing? When he's in the cubicle singing the lyrics? Is that what you mean?
The black security guard hears it, and that's the same guy that's in that when the prostitutes arrive.
Yeah, getting a blowjob.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
And he gives her the keys.
Yeah.
To get in or something, or the pass. No, he gives her the pass to get in.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed now that I heard the album before I saw the film because it'd be interesting the other way around. Like, I think hearing the album's a very different experience. You'd recognize a lot of the songs, but there's a lot more. They obviously didn't use the whole album because it's pretty massive. It's
right.
a double album, isn't it? It's pretty long.
But they did have a whole live show. The film ended up mimicking it with the characters. Like I think in the live version they had these blow up schoolmaster, and they had like the blow up mom, and
I mean he's still touring The Wall now, isn't he? I mean he just put a new version of Mother on probably YouTube or somewhere online.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
I haven't watched it. It's like got 5 million views or something crazy.
Yeah, it was good.
But he's still doing The Wall. I mean he's obviously with a new band and stuff, or a more recent band, so it's so close to his heart. But,
Gerald Scarfe did another animation for them before The Wall, for Wish You Were Here, I think he did.
What was it?
I think it's Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I think he did the video for that, And it's the same, in the wall, there's a figure floating in space and turning around in space. And then he turns into a leaf and then back into a man. It's the same animation in Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I think it's that song.
I wonder if he did the pigs floating in the air. Maybe he didn't know, for animals. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh,
check that. Just on the subject of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, it's a bit of a tangent, but have you heard the story of when Syd Barrett Syd Barrett walked into Abbey Road Studios when they were doing that song? Do you know that story?
I've heard it.
I think it's in all the Pink Floyd documentaries. What happened was he left the band around 68 and, he was in a terrible state. But they actually did a combination, not Waters, but a combination of the other, I think it was Rich Wright and David Gilmour helped him with his 2 solo albums. But basically they're in Abbey Road 1975 doing Shine On You Crazy Diamond. And someone notices, oh, who's that fella? And there's a fellow in the control room who shaved his head, which is where you get the shaving the body.
Wow, okay.
Syd Barrett, he was 4 or 5 stone overweight. What would that be in pounds? So he's 70 pounds overweight. And he had a bald head completely hanging around the control room while they were doing this song. And someone said, oh, hang on, who's that guy? And then they finally took, oh, that's Syd Barrett. And of course, they're all shocked. Like Roger and David were apparently in tears, Wow. How weird is that? What a bizarre story. And there's a picture of him as well. And he's just got this huge belly, totally bald head, no eyebrows, just with this vacant, black holes in the sun or whatever it was, the lyric.
That's where they got the scene where he shaved his eyebrows. So,
yeah.
Plus the cigarette apparently was Syd Barrett, the cigarette burning. He used to burn his fingers because he was too out.
Shine On. I don't know if it's true, but Shine On You Crazy Diamond is supposed to be SYD. So it's Sid. I read it in the comments. I don't know if it's true, but
I think we're in LSD, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds territory. Could be or might not be. Yeah. The song is definitely about him. I mean, they've definitely never hidden that. Totally about him. And Wish You Were Here, the whole idea, really.
I mean, when Sid was a part of the band we talked about the earlier music, Pink Floyd was Pink Floyd with Syd Barrett, but then Pink Floyd, the name almost became a character that they sort of referenced, and they referenced that in the Wish You Were Here album. I think it's, Have a Cigar, where he's like, oh, the band is really great. Which one's Pink? Pink, I think I remember thinking, oh, is Pink Floyd a person? Until I really knew it sort of, morphed into this character almost.
Yeah, and a brand, of course, as well. Well, Pink.
Yeah, well, sure.
Comes from 2 blues singers. I can't remember their names, but one was called Pink.
Yeah.
And Syd Barrett named the band. It's a weird parallel with the Rolling Stones because Brian Jones was obviously the main man in the Rolling Stones. And he named that band and eventually got sacked, basically. Syd Barrett, of course, survived until 2006. But Roger Waters was asked, did you ever try and get in touch with him? He said, it's not a good idea, But the spectre of Syd Barrett's always going to be there. Listen, I'm sure we could go on probably all night. Well, it's morning for you, isn't it, Jcrash? But evening.
All right.
Not anymore. Yeah, it's past noon now.
Yeah. Can we just do final thoughts? I mean, for me, massive recommendation. This film's not going to be for everyone. Some people might call it too stylized, but, for me, I just love it. And go on, final thoughts, Jcrash?
No, I just think it's a brilliant film. To me, I just as a Pink Floyd fan or even, if you're not familiar completely with Pink Floyd, I think that the film, and you're into just film as a medium and the art of it, I think you can respect this film even if you're not, a huge Pink Floyd buff. Just like our experiences, you could end up becoming a Pink Floyd fan much larger than you think after seeing the film.
Yeah, and of course there's live concerts as well. They did. I'm pretty sure they must have done the whole album, from start to finish, like the Who did with Tommy. I'm sure there's stuff online with concerts. And Filippo, final thoughts?
Yes, the same. I think it's a brilliant film. I think it's really a work of art, and it mixes 3 great artists because you've got musician Roger Waters and Gerald Scarfe Alan Parker. So 3 different kind of art forms coming together, and just like 3 brilliant artists that created this thing. I related to it, like we were talking about loneliness earlier. And I think I related to it because I was going through a phase, when you're young and you just feel like you're completely alone and there's a wall between you and society. So I think, a lot of people can relate, even though it doesn't have a linear narrative. Like you were saying, that a lot of critics didn't like it because it's like all over the place. But it's a great movie. It's a look into a person's psyche, I think, into the inside of your subconscious.
Yeah, I suppose what it might be missing, I mean, it'd be nice if there had been perhaps something a bit hopeful about it, because it's a little bit bleak. But then again, I think it's quite an uplifting sort of sensory experience. I don't really feel depressed when I watch it. I just revel in it, really. It's like a tumble of sprawling images. But it makes some sense to me. I mean, I think what's great about it is that we could discuss the themes, forever, and we're never going to really agree on anything. But there's enough there that we could all talk about it, just like art, really. Art is like that.
I think Roger Waters wanted, like in the movie, he wanted the actual band to be playing, and then Alan Parker wanted to make a movie that wasn't like a band playing. It wasn't a concert. It was more like a thing on its own.
Oh, I think that's a much better decision. Yeah. I think it would ruin it to have a band, because then it's kind of got nothing.
Totally.
One thing it does well, actually, just final note, it kind of gives you information that tells you, like, you see one picture of them on their wedding day, him and his wife, and you kind of know that they've been happy at some point. So it kind of does that, and know he's a rock star, but you don't actually have to hear him playing any music. I mean, okay, Bob Geldof sings at the Nazi rally, but that's not necessarily Pink. That might be some sort of fantasy. It's not necessarily the same guy who's trashing the hotel room.
I find it's like different aspects of the personality. You get the Nazi, the crazy rocker, the child, the lover, whatever, the drug addict. It's like all these different characters.
Yeah.
Probably all of us have different characters in us.
Sure.
Yeah. Without the groupies in my case, but anyway, that's another story. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much to both of you for being on the show. Before we go, can you just tell us what you've got online? I'll put links in the show notes, but Jcrash, tell us about your YouTube channel. Just one thing, you've got down to, in your greatest films, you're down to number 11. So when are we going to get the top 10?
I'm actually working on that right now, doing the top 10. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I will be releasing that. But of course, just really busy with music here, not only just the music that I post to my channel, but also working right now with a different group in a kind of a collaboration type thing. And we've got songs that we're going to be releasing soon too. And just continue to do that on my channel, but probably don't get to the film stuff as much as I would like because I'm so busy musically. But I am getting down to it, and we'll have the top 10 up soon.
Cool. And your channel is Jcrash in the Car. And
yes.
Filippo, where's your work online? Have you got some stuff?
Yeah, I've got a website and Instagram. Like most of my stuff's on Instagram. I can give you the address. And
can you just give us the name of the account and the name of the website, and then I'll put the links anyway.
The website, it's a bit long too. I'm going to have to give it to you because I don't remember what it is exactly.
All right, no problem. Yeah. It'll be in the show notes, so no problem. But
my Instagram is Filippo Francocci, my handle.
Can you spell your last name?
Yeah, sure. FRANCOCCI.
Okay.
I've got a YouTube channel as well, but I'm still working on it because I'm trying to learn how to mix music and produce music. So I'm doing some songs, but I don't have a lot on my channel yet. But
you've got some songs. You've got a video.
I can give you the...
Yeah, what's your YouTube channel?
My name is Filter on YouTube. I did a song that's an old song that I used to play with my high school band. and I'm re-recording it. So the song is called Executioner, and the band is called Brutal Awakening.
Awesome.
And it's very heavy, kind of. Well, not very heavy, but quite heavy.
Channel, yeah, Filter.
Filter, yeah, that's my channel.
Yeah. All right. I'm kind of a retired rock star, but I'm putting my back catalogue online. I just made a playlist.
Which I like, by the way. It's good.
Oh, thank you.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah.
We just put a studio playlist. Me and the producer I had in Madrid, we chose the best songs, and I'm putting together a live playlist. So there'll be loads of videos I made. I had a band called the Backfield Plan in Madrid.
Awesome.
Make a playlist of that. So we've got plenty of that. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, I really had a
Thank
great
you.
time, guys.
Thanks for inviting us.
All right. So thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you soon for more Film Gold.